Rain hammered the marketplace roof as I stood there frozen, clutching wedding invitations against my chest. My mother Ruth tore one clean in half before everyone watching. "You've shamed this family," she shouted, her voice cutting through the crowd's murmurs. "Marrying a beggar? A drifter? Anya, you were never marriage material, but I never thought you'd sink this low." The torn paper felt like my heart splitting. People stared with pity mixed with judgment. Some whispered behind their hands. Others just looked away. My fingers trembled as I held the ruined invitation, my mother's words echoing louder than the thunder overhead. This wasn't how I imagined telling her about my engagement. This wasn't how anything was supposed to happen. But there I stood, soaked and humiliated, watching my own mother disown me in front of the entire town. The rain mixed with my tears, and I wondered if anyone could tell the difference. My name is Anya, and that was the day everything changed. I walked away from the shouting crowd, wiping rain and shame from my face. My small tailoring stall waited under its leaky roof, my sanctuary and my prison all at once. I'd spent 23 years in this lakeside town, stitching clothes for people who barely noticed me. My mother had always made sure I knew my place. "You smell like thread and dye," she'd say whenever young men came around. No respectable man wants a wife with calloused fingers and fabric scraps in her hair. I'd learned to accept it, believing that maybe she was right. Maybe I wasn't meant for love or marriage or anything beyond my sewing machine. But then Kai appeared, and everything I'd accepted as truth began to unravel like poorly sewn thread. Now, standing in my workshop surrounded by half-finished garments, I questioned whether choosing love over my mother's approval was the bravest or stupidest thing I'd ever done. Morning light filtered through the patched canvas roof of my stall. Children's laughter floated in from outside, a sound that always made the loneliness easier to bear. I picked up a torn school uniform, running my fingers over the frayed collar. The parents couldn't afford to pay me, but I mended it anyway. I'd been doing this for years, fixing clothes for families who struggled just like mine once did. Each stitch felt like an act of quiet rebellion against my mother's obsession with status and money. She couldn't understand why I'd waste time on charity work when I could be attracting wealthy customers. But these stitches mattered more to me than any payment. The smell of starch and fabric glue filled my workspace, familiar and comforting. My mother called this place a prison, but to me, it was freedom. Here, I could be useful. Here, I could matter. Here, nobody judged me for having dreams bigger than marriage and children. Or at least, they hadn't until yesterday. The storm came 3 months ago, the day my life split into before and after. Rain poured down like the sky was breaking apart. I was closing my stall when I heard wood cracking nearby. An old cart had collapsed under the weight of fabric bolts, and they were tumbling into the mud. A man in plain clothes struggled to save them alone, his shoulders hunched against the downpour. Without thinking, I rushed over to help. "Here," I said, offering my only umbrella. "You'll catch your death out here." He looked up, and our eyes met. Something in his gaze made me pause, like he was seeing more than just a girl covered in fabric dust. "Thank you," he said, his voice steady and warm despite the chaos around us. "I'm Kai." His hands were calloused like mine, his clothes simple and worn. But when he smiled, it felt like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. We gathered the ruined fabric together, neither of us minding the mud or rain. That was how it started, with an umbrella and a stranger who didn't look at me the way everyone else did. Kai started coming back every week after that. At first, I thought he was just being polite, returning the kindness I'd shown. But he kept appearing, always with tea or small treats from the market. He'd help me carry heavy fabric rolls without being asked. He'd sit quietly while I worked, watching my hands move with what seemed like genuine interest. "You make it look easy," he said once, observing me repair a wedding dress. "It's not," I admitted, threading my needle. "But nothing worth doing ever is." He smiled at that, and I noticed how his eyes crinkled at the corners. People started talking, of course. In a small town, everything becomes everyone's business. She's wasting her time with a drifter, they whispered. Poor Anya, always picking up strays. But I didn't care. When Kai was around, the workshop felt less lonely. His presence was gentle, undemanding. He never asked me to be anything other than myself. After years of my mother's criticism and the town's pity, that acceptance felt like the greatest gift anyone had ever given me. My mother discovered Kai on a Tuesday afternoon. She stormed into my stall wearing her expensive perfume, the scent cutting through the familiar smell of fabric and chalk dust. Her eyes landed on Kai immediately, taking in his worn clothes and calloused hands. I watched her expression shift from surprise to disgust. Anya, she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Who is your friend? Before I could answer, she turned to Kai with a smile that never reached her eyes. You work with your hands, I see. How noble. The sarcasm hung heavy in the air. Kai stood slowly, meeting her gaze with quiet dignity. I do, ma'am. There's honor in honest work. My mother laughed, sharp and cruel. Honor doesn't pay bills, young man. It doesn't put food on the table or provide security for a family. She turned back to me. Anya, I need to speak with you. Alone. After Kai left, she unleashed her fury. What are you thinking? That man is nobody. He has nothing. You're throwing away any chance at a decent future. But I'd already made my choice, even if I didn't fully realize it yet. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mother's words replayed endlessly in my mind. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the simple ring Kai had admired at a market stall weeks ago. I'd noticed him looking at it, though he'd said nothing. Around midnight, I heard footsteps. My mother appeared in the doorway, her face softer than before but still stern. Anya, she began, sitting across from me. I need you to understand something. Love without security is just suffering in disguise. I loved your father, but we were poor, and that poverty poisoned everything. Every argument, every hardship, every disappointment traced back to money we didn't have. Her hands trembled slightly. I don't want that life for you. I want better. Why must love wear a suit to be worthy? I asked quietly. Why can't it just be kind and honest and real? She slammed her hand on the table, making me jump. Because poverty ruins love faster than hate ever could. You think kindness pays rent? You think honesty fills an empty stomach? Her voice cracked. I'm trying to protect you from the mistakes I made. But all I heard was that my happiness didn't matter as much as appearances did. 2 weeks later, everything changed again. Kai and I walked through the night market, paper lanterns casting golden light over the crowded stalls. The air smelled like grilled meat and sweet pastries. Children ran past us laughing, and somewhere a musician played a haunting melody on a wooden flute. Kai stopped suddenly near the fountain at the market's center. He turned to face me, and I saw nervousness in his eyes for the first time since we'd met. Anya, he said, reaching into his pocket. I know I'm not what your mother wants for you. I know I can't offer you much. But you've shown me something I'd forgotten existed. He pulled out a silver ring, simple and hand-shaped, clearly made by someone who understood craftsmanship. You make broken things whole, he continued, his voice rough with emotion. Not just fabric, but people too. You made me remember why I loved what I do. Will you marry me? My heart hammered against my ribs. Around us, the market seemed to fade away. Yes, I whispered, trembling between joy and fear. Yes, I'll marry you. He slipped the ring onto my finger, and for one perfect moment, nothing else mattered. I decided to tell my mother about the engagement at a family dinner. Looking back, that was probably a mistake. I brought Kai to our house on a Sunday evening, hoping the formal setting might inspire better behavior. My mother had dressed in her finest clothes, jewelry glinting at her throat and wrists. She greeted Kai with icy politeness, the kind that drips like venom. Throughout dinner, she asked pointed questions designed to embarrass him. What do you do for work, Kai? Where did you study? What are your prospects? What can you provide for my daughter? Kai answered each question with calm dignity, never rising to her bait. When dessert arrived, he presented her with a small gift, a handkerchief he'd embroidered himself with delicate flowers. I'd watched him work on it for days. My mother held it up to the light, examining it with theatrical care. Then she laughed, high and cruel. Trinkets from a tailor's pet. How charming. She tossed it aside. Anya actually believes this is worth something. My face burned with shame and anger. Kai's expression remained neutral, but I saw his jaw tighten. That night marked the beginning of the end, though I didn't know it yet. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of dread I couldn't explain. I went to my stall early, hoping Kai would arrive with tea like he always did. The morning passed slowly. Then afternoon came, and evening. No Kai. I tried calling, but his phone went straight to voicemail. His cart wasn't at its usual spot in the market. Nobody had seen him. As sunset painted the sky orange and pink, I walked back to my workshop with heavy steps. That's when I saw it. Kai's promise ring sitting on my sewing table, glinting in the fading light. Next to it lay a handkerchief I'd never seen before, embroidered with an unfamiliar golden crest. No note, no explanation, just these two items arranged carefully on my workspace. My hands shook as I picked up the ring. Had he changed his mind? Had my mother's cruelty driven him away? The handkerchief's golden thread caught the light, and something about it nagged at my memory. I'd seen that crest somewhere before, but I couldn't place where. That night, I cried myself to sleep, clutching both items like they might disappear too. Days turned into weeks. I kept working, kept sewing, kept breathing, but it felt mechanical. Empty. The children still brought their torn uniforms, and I still mended them without charge. But the joy had drained from the work. People whispered everywhere I went. Poor Anya, abandoned by that drifter. I told her he was too good to be true. She should have listened to her mother. Even the kind ones offered pity that felt worse than mockery. My mother visited once, her expression a mixture of triumph and something that might have been sympathy. I'm sorry you had to learn this lesson the hard way, she said, not sounding sorry at all. But maybe now you'll understand. Men like that, they take what they can and leave. At least he left before you married him and ruined your reputation completely. I didn't answer. I just kept stitching, needle moving through fabric with practiced precision. The handkerchief with its golden crest sat in my pocket, a constant weight. Sometimes I'd take it out and study the intricate embroidery, wondering what it meant. Wondering if Kai had been someone other than who he claimed. The letter arrived on a Thursday morning exactly 4 weeks after Kai disappeared. I found it slipped under my stall's door, sealed in cream-colored paper. No stamp, no return address. Just my name written in elegant script. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside, gold lettering shimmered against white cardstock. To the one who stitched light into my darkness, it read. Your presence is requested at the address below. Come alone. Come with an open heart. All will be revealed. Below the message were coordinates and a date, 3 days from now. No signature, no explanation. I turned the card over and over, looking for clues. The paper was expensive, the kind my mother would approve of. The gold ink was real, not printed. Someone had taken care with this invitation, had made it special. But who? My mother walked in while I was studying it. She snatched it from my hands, reading quickly. A scam, she announced immediately. Some cruel joke. Throw it away, Anya. Don't humiliate yourself further by chasing ghosts. But something in my chest refused to let go. That handkerchief, this letter, they had to mean something. They had to connect to Kai somehow. I spent 3 days debating whether to go. My logical mind agreed with my mother, it was probably nothing. Maybe even dangerous. But my heart kept insisting otherwise. I pulled out the handkerchief again, studying the golden crest in better light. That's when recognition finally clicked. I'd seen this symbol before, embroidered on curtains I'd repaired last year. They'd belonged to Tannin Textiles, the largest fabric company in the region. The owner had sent them to my stall specifically, requesting my work. I'd been honored at the time, though I'd never met the family. Could there be a connection? It seemed impossible. But the coincidence felt too precise to ignore. The night before the date on the invitation, I packed a small bag. The handkerchief, the ring Kai had left, my sewing shears just in case this was some elaborate trap. My mother found me preparing to leave at dawn. "You're actually going," she said, her voice flat with disappointment. "Anya, you're throwing away what little dignity you have left." I met her eyes steadily. "Maybe. But I'd rather know the truth than spend my life wondering." I walked out before she could respond, heading for the bus station as the sun rose behind me. The bus ride took 3 hours, winding through mountain roads I'd never traveled before. I watched the landscape change outside my window, the familiar lake growing distant behind us. The coordinates led me up a hillside I recognized but had never visited, toward an estate I'd only heard about in gossip and rumor. The Tannin family mansion, where the region's textile empire was run. My stomach twisted with confusion and hope and fear all tangled together. Why would they invite me here? What did this have to do with Kai? The bus dropped me at a small stop near the base of the hill. From there, I had to walk. My bag felt heavier with each step, though it contained almost nothing. The morning air was cool and sweet, carrying the scent of jasmine from somewhere nearby. Finally, I rounded a bend and stopped breathing. Massive iron gates rose before me, intricate metalwork forming patterns of thread and needles. Beyond them, a white stone mansion sprawled across manicured lawns. Guards in formal uniforms stood at attention. When they saw me, they bowed. Actually bowed. Then the gates swung open without a word spoken, and I stepped into a world I'd never imagined entering. The driveway stretched forever, lined with flowering trees that filled the air with perfume. My worn shoes felt wrong against the smooth stones. My simple dress seemed shabby compared to the grandeur surrounding me. Staff members appeared along the path, each one bowing as I passed. Nobody spoke. Nobody explained. They just gestured me forward, deeper into this impossible situation. My heart hammered so hard I thought everyone must hear it. The mansion's front doors stood open, revealing a marble entrance hall that could have swallowed my entire workshop 3 times over. Crystal chandeliers hung from painted ceilings. Silk curtains framed windows taller than trees. And everywhere, I saw fabric, tapestries and rugs and wall hangings of such quality they must have cost more than I'd earn in a lifetime. A woman in formal dress appeared, older and kind-faced. "Miss Anya," she said, and I jumped at hearing my name. "We've been expecting you. Please, follow me." She led me down a corridor lined with portraits. I barely glanced at them, too overwhelmed to focus. But then one painting caught my eye, and I stopped walking. My breath caught in my throat. My heart seemed to stop entirely. The portrait showed a man in an expensive suit, surrounded by executives and documents. His hair was styled differently, and he wore glasses I'd never seen, but I'd know that face anywhere. Those eyes that had watched me sew with such gentle attention. That smile that had made my workshop feel less lonely. Kai. Below the painting, a small plaque read Kai Tannin, Heir and Operations Director, Tannin Textiles. I reached out with shaking fingers, touching the frame like it might dissolve under my hand. This couldn't be real. Kai, my Kai who wore worn clothes and helped me carry fabric, who made tea and asked for nothing, was the heir to a textile empire? "You're wondering why he didn't tell you," a voice said behind me. I spun around. Kai stood in the doorway, dressed in white linen that probably cost more than my stall. His hair was neat, his posture different, more confident. But his eyes were the same. Those eyes that had seen me, really seen me, when everyone else looked through me. "I wanted you to love the man," he said quietly, walking closer. "Not the name. Not the money. Not what I could provide. Just me." His voice cracked on the last word. "Your mother's words at dinner, about worth and status, I've heard them my whole life. People want something from me, never just wanting me." I stood frozen, trying to process everything. Anger and relief and confusion swirled together until I couldn't separate them. "You lied to me," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "You let me think you were nobody. You let my mother humiliate both of us." Kai stepped closer, pain clear in his expression. "I know. I know it was wrong. But Anya, from the moment you offered me that umbrella, you treated me like I mattered. Not because of what I owned or who my family was, but because I was a person who needed help. Do you know how rare that is?" He reached for my hand, then seemed to think better of it. "I've had people pretend to love me for years, always wanting something. Access to my family's business, social connections, money. Nobody ever just wanted to sit quietly and watch me work. Nobody ever cared that I loved fabric and craftsmanship as much as making money from it." His words started breaking down my anger. I wanted to stay furious, to protect myself. But I remembered all those afternoons in my workshop, how genuine his interest had seemed. How he'd never asked for anything except my company. "So what now?" I asked. "Why bring me here? Why the mysterious letter?" Before he could answer, shouting erupted from somewhere behind us. My mother's voice cut through the mansion's elegant silence like scissors through silk. "Anya! Where are you?" I turned toward the sound as Ruth burst into the portrait hall, her face red with anger and exertion. She must have followed me somehow, probably unable to bear the thought of me attending this mysterious meeting alone. Her eyes found me first, then traveled to Kai standing nearby. Recognition flickered across her face, confusion following quickly after. "You," she breathed, her hand going to her throat. "You're the owner I begged for business 3 years ago. The one who placed that order for specialty curtains." She stumbled backward, her expensive shoes catching on the marble floor. "You're Kai Tannen." The air. Her face went white. Then gray. Her knees buckled, and she started falling. Staff members rushed forward, catching her before she hit the ground. They carried her to a nearby sitting room, fanning her face and checking her pulse. I knelt beside her unconscious form, my emotions a tangled mess. Part of me wanted to feel vindictive satisfaction. She'd humiliated me, called my fiancé worthless, tried to destroy my happiness. Now she knew the truth. But seeing her collapse, I only felt sad. Sad that status mattered more to her than my happiness. Sad that she'd never learned what real worth meant. My mother woke slowly, her eyes fluttering open to find me holding her hand. Kai stood behind me, giving us space but not leaving. Ruth looked from me to him, then back again. Her mouth opened and closed several times before words emerged. "I don't understand," she whispered. "You were dressed in rags. You worked in mud and rain. You lived like you had nothing." Kai knelt down to her level, his expression gentle. "I did have nothing that mattered, Mrs. Ruth. I had money and status and a famous name. But I didn't have honesty. I didn't have someone who saw me as a person first. Your daughter gave me that." He glanced at me, and the warmth in his eyes made my breath catch. She helped a stranger in the rain without asking what he could do for her. She offered kindness without expecting payment. In a world where everyone wants something from me, she just wanted to share an umbrella. My mother's eyes filled with tears. But I told her she wasn't marriage material. I said no good man would want her. I destroyed her engagement announcement in front of the whole town. Her voice broke. What have I done? Cameras flashed outside the windows. I realized reporters had gathered, somehow learning that the reclusive Tannen heir had brought a mysterious woman to the estate. The whispers would start soon, the speculation. But for once, I didn't care what people thought. The wedding happened at sunset 3 weeks later. We chose the lakeside where I'd first given Kai my umbrella, the place where everything had started. No grand cathedral, no hundreds of guests. Just immediate family, a handful of close friends, and the gentle sound of water lapping against the shore. I wore a dress I'd sewn myself, simple and elegant, every stitch placed with care. My mother had offered to buy me something expensive from the city's best boutiques, but I'd declined. This dress felt more me than any designer label ever could. Kai wore a suit but carried the worn jacket he'd worn the day we met, draped over his arm like a talisman. When the officiant asked for our vows, Kai spoke first. I promise to never hide who I am from you again. To trust your love enough to be vulnerable. To remember that worth isn't measured in money but in moments of genuine connection. His voice carried across the water, steady and sure. My turn. I looked at him, at my mother sitting in the front row dabbing her eyes, at the lake glowing golden in the fading light. I promise to see you for who you are, not what you have. To value honesty over comfort. To remember that the strongest threads are woven from trust. We exchanged rings, the same simple silver band Kai had offered at the night market. Later, after sunset, we walked along the shore together. Kai squeezed my hand. No regrets, he asked. I smiled, truly and completely. Not one. My mother changed after the wedding. Not overnight, and not completely. But gradually, like fabric slowly taking dye. She started visiting my workshop again, but differently this time. Instead of criticizing, she watched. Instead of mocking, she asked questions. One afternoon, she picked up a torn school uniform I was mending and examined it carefully. You don't charge for this work, she said. Not a question, an observation. No, I replied, keeping my focus on my stitching. Their family can't afford it. But their daughter needs a uniform to attend school. My mother was quiet for a long moment. Then she picked up a needle and thread. Show me how, she said softly. Show me how you do this. I looked up in surprise. She'd never asked to learn before. Had always considered manual work beneath her dignity. But her hands were steady, her expression sincere. So I taught her. We worked side by side in comfortable silence, broken only by my occasional instructions. As the sun moved across the sky, I saw my mother's shoulders relax. Saw something in her face soften that had been hard for years. I was wrong, she said suddenly, still focused on her stitching. About so many things. About what makes someone worthy. About what makes a good life. She met my eyes. You tried to teach me, and I refused to learn. With Kai's backing, I reopened my workshop on a larger scale. We found a beautiful space near the original market, big enough for multiple workstations. I hired women who'd been dismissed from other jobs for being too old, too unconventional, or too outspoken. Women like I'd been, considered not marriage material or past their prime by narrow-minded people. The shop thrived. Word spread about the quality of our work and our mission. Orders came in faster than we could fill them. But I made sure we always reserved time for the free repairs, for the families who needed help but couldn't pay. My mother became our most regular volunteer. She'd arrive early, often before I did, and work quietly alongside the others. She never mentioned her past criticism, but her actions spoke louder than words. She funded new sewing machines, donated expensive fabric, and personally taught classes for young girls interested in learning the trade. One day, a wealthy investor who'd once mocked me at a social function arrived asking for a partnership. I recognized him immediately, remembered his sneering comments about charity work being a waste of time. My mother watched carefully as he made his pitch, offering money and connections in exchange for a share of the business. I let the investor finish his speech, then set down my sewing with deliberate care. "Mr. Hollister," I said, remembering his name from that painful dinner party months ago. "I appreciate your interest. But I'm going to decline." His confident smile faltered. "Excuse me? Do you understand what I'm offering? Access to markets you'll never reach alone, capital for expansion, connections to clients who could triple your revenue." He leaned forward, his tone becoming condescending. "You're running a charity, not a business. I'm offering to make you legitimate." My mother stood up from her workstation, her voice cutting through the room. "My daughter is already legitimate, Mr. Hollister. More legitimate than you'll ever be." He turned to her, startled. "Mrs. Ruth? I didn't realize you worked here." She smiled, cold and precise. "There's a lot you don't realize. For instance, you don't realize that some threads are too tangled to reuse. Some partnerships would compromise everything we've built. My daughter learned that lesson before I did, but I'm learning it now." She moved to stand beside me. "She's creating something valuable, something that helps people. You want to profit from that without understanding it?" The answer is no. Mr. Hollister left quickly after that, flustered and angry. After he'd gone, I hugged my mother for the first time in months. 6 months after the wedding, I started a free sewing school for young girls. We met twice a week in the workshop, teaching not just technical skills but business sense and self-worth. I remembered being their age, being told I wasn't enough, wasn't marriage material, wasn't destined for anything significant. I wanted them to know differently. On the wall of the schoolroom, I hung the original wedding invitation my mother had torn in half. I'd carefully stitched it back together with gold thread, turning the damage into something deliberate and beautiful. Below it, I placed a small plaque with words I'd written myself. Humiliation was only the first stitch in my masterpiece. The girls often asked about it, curious about the story. I told them everything, holding nothing back. About my mother's rejection, Kai's disappearance, the discovery of his true identity. About learning to value myself when others didn't. About finding love that saw me, truly saw me, beneath the surface judgments. One girl, shy and soft-spoken like I'd been, raised her hand during class. "Miss Anya," she asked. "Did you ever doubt yourself? Did you ever believe what your mother said about you?" I considered the question carefully. "Yes," I admitted. "Many times. But doubting myself and accepting others' limitations are different things. I doubted, but I kept sewing anyway. Kept helping anyway. Kept believing that kindness mattered even when I wasn't sure I mattered." A year after that rain-soaked day in the marketplace, I stood at the edge of the same lake where I'd first met Kai. Rain fell softly, just like it had then, but this time I felt only peace. The workshop had expanded again. We now employed 30 women and trained 50 more each year through the free school. My mother worked alongside me most days, her expensive jewelry replaced by simple work clothes. She'd found purpose in the stitching, in the quiet satisfaction of making broken things whole. Kai appeared beside me, offering an umbrella just like I'd done for him. "Full circle," he said with a smile. I took his hand, lacing our fingers together. "Not quite. This is just another beginning." A child's voice called from the workshop behind us. One of my students, probably needing help with a difficult seam. I turned to go back, but not before taking one more look at the lake. The water rippled with raindrops, each one creating expanding circles that touched and overlapped, creating patterns too complex to predict. That was what kindness did, I realized. It spread outward in ways you couldn't control or anticipate, touching people you'd never meet, creating beauty you'd never see. My mother had finally understood that. I'd understood it all along. And now we were teaching it to others, one stitch at a time. As I walked back toward the workshop, I thought about how I'd tell this story someday. Not as a fairy tale with a perfect ending, but as a reminder. Kindness doesn't beg for reward, it becomes one. And love, real love, is the thread that never breaks.